This episode is sponsored by the Cornell S.E. Johnson College of Business. The Cornell Executive MBA Americas program is designed for goal achievers from any industry. The program works by advancing your career without interruption, by providing global perspectives and intimate classroom settings, and by challenging, informing, connecting, and propelling you. Achieve your goals with the Cornell Executive MBA Americas program on the weekend and close to home. Search Cornell EMBA Americas in my city today.
Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Maricella Herrera and Megan Oliver.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ellevate podcast. I'm Maricella Herrera, and I am here with my co-host, Megan Oliver.
Hello.
How's it going, Megan?
Better. I know we record these in advance, but, I've had time to breathe. So anybody who's wondering about, my headspace after last week is, it's not been that long since we recorded that one, but I've had a little time to breathe. Although I did find out that, not to get into too much of that, but I did find out that I actually have a very, very close family friend who they were at those outlets about 2 hours beforehand. She and her 14-year-old son, it's like one of my mom's closest friends from work, but he had a stomach ache. And so they just went home early, which might have saved their lives. Or ugh.
So for anyone who wasn't listening or didn't listen to last week's episode, what Megan is talking about is the shooting at the mall in Texas that happened
In Allen, Texas, which is about 25 minutes from me.
So that is what Megan is talking about and why it had been a hard time for her and your mental health. I just want to make sure our listeners are aware of what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's completely fine. Yeah, I kind of launched into it with the assumption, I was like, wait, a lot of people listen to this, in varying order. So yeah, that's what's happening there. But I'm doing better. It's the whole community is as a whole community is always rocked by this sort of thing. The whole community is just kind of figuring out how to move on. I think the outlets are actually reopening today. So my heart goes out to especially all those workers who have to go back to work after what happened.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you're doing a little bit better, though.
Yeah. And people are tough. People will.
Look, we've learned that, right? Like everyone, we keep getting, not that we want to, not that this is right, but we are resilient and we keep moving, forward and keeping up and doing things. Again, not that we should.
Yeah, if you didn't hear our conversation last week, it was very clear that we do not think this is something that should be going on, and that things need to be done.
Yep, change needs to happen.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, everyone, please take care of your mental health and please take care of yourself. These things are hard, and unfortunately, it's the world we're living in, and making sure that you are taking care of yourself is very, very important.
Yeah, go take a walk, go play with. I yesterday when I was just feeling down, my little niece was visiting because my parents helped take care of her, and I'm still with them until I move into my new place in June. And I just went down and played with her for a little while because it just let me breathe.
Good.
Yeah.
Breathing is good.
Yes, agreed. Speaking of breathing, I don't want to take up as much time in the podcast as I did with my feelings last week, though they were and real. So I do want to go ahead and let you know what is going on at Ellevate this week.
Yep. Tell us.
Yep. Alrighty. So we have our Ellevate Roundtable this Thursday, which is going to be all about actually creating space for yourself at work. Why do we keep having these topics that perfectly align with, like, I swear we're not setting this up.
No, we're not. We really aren't. But it goes to show that we mean this and that this is top of mind currently and that it is needed, because we do try to bring the topics for our roundtables uh, that we know are going to be helpful and that we know people need. And I think we all need to create some space for ourselves.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, at work and just in our lives, just create space for yourself. You know, life is too short to put all your eggs in one basket. Just let yourself be yourself.
Yep. And if you need more space, like if you are like, sure, I'll create space for myself, but I don't know, and you need the accountability to do that, put our community circles in your calendar, because that can be the 1 hour you use to decompress, to take a deep breath, to just, I like to think about it as the big exhale for the day.
Yeah, and this week we have one community circle coming up, which is our parents and caregivers community circle. That's Wednesday, which is today, day of the episode's release. So be sure to go to that if you are a parent, if you are a caregiver, anywhere in between. Come in, get support, talk to people who get it. I know that that's one of those that, because I think Rebecca leads that one, right?
Yep.
Our colleague Rebecca, yeah, who she's fabulous. And I hear from her pretty much every month about how that circle went, and it's always just so many people saying, "Oh, I needed this today."
Yeah, it's a good one. I have not been to that one because I am not a parent or a caregiver, but I've been to the rest, or not the rest, the ones that apply to me. Yeah. Particularly the Latinx community circle. I try to go every month. It's honestly just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. And then we have some in-person events. Again, we record these in advance, so please check our website, ellevatenetwork.com, for any other in-person events, because as of right now, we've only got 2 coming up this week, but there could be 7 by the time this goes up, so be sure to check. But what I do have posted in advance is our Miami chapter is having an in-person happy hour all about the power of reinvention. That's Wednesday, today, day of the release. And our New York City chapter is having a New York City executive event, Ask Her Anything, with leading HR executives Tara Favors and Virginia Hancher. That is on Thursday.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I will probably be there. So if you want to come say hi to me, please go to this event. I know the New York City chapter has put a lot of effort into it. I know the team that's behind it and has planned it, and they're also leaders in HR. So I am sure this conversation will be fantastic.
Yes. And speaking of conversations, we are
Mm-hmm.
going to get into, I teased it a little bit last week, but at this point, you've heard me do some interviews on the History Makers series, our little spin-off series on Fridays. But starting this week, this is the first one that I did the interview for this podcast, which you couldn't get a better first guest. Like, holy cow. I interviewed Rumaitha Al Busaidi, who is going to be one of our speakers at Mobilize Women. She's going to be speaking on gender equity and climate change. She's incredible. Let me just try to go through her bio in brief, but like there's no brief version of her bio.
And
So
she's so young. It's like
she's so young. She's like,
incredible.
I think she's my age. Yeah, she's an Omani marine scientist and environmental activist working on sustainable solutions to climate change. She serves on the board of the only environmental NGO in her country, the Environment Society of Oman, and actively works with the government on sustainable diversification strategies in food production and climate change adaptation strategies. She's advised the Biden administration, she's advised the Arab League, she's a member of the first ever Arab Youth Council on Climate Change. She's co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Davos Lab, where she co-authored the Youth Recovery Plan, featuring policy recommendations from over 2 million young people across the globe. She is so cool. She also is we talk a lot about soccer in it too, because she's like a history maker in terms of like soccer, and she loves that. And it's so good. It's such a cool, fun interview that I was like nerding out about the environment and about everything. She talks about other environmental activists that you definitely should be following, that you might not have heard of. And yeah, you're really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have Rumaitha as part of our Mobilize Women Summit. It's a panel that I've been wanting to do for several years now, and I'm so excited we finally get to do it. So gender equity and climate change and that relationship is quite important, and we don't discuss it enough because women are the ones that are more affected by climate change. We're also the ones that can move things forward because we are the ones that bring back more money into our community. The speakers for this panel, I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm the one that invites them, but they're great. We will have Rumaitha, who you will meet today on the podcast. We'll have Joanne Swap, who is the VP of Operations at Suncommon, and you will have someone that is a treat for me because she is a friend of mine. We're going to have Christina Shim, who's the global head of product and strategy at IBM Sustainability Software. So very excited for that conversation. I hope you can join us at Mobilize Women. It is on June 7th. It's all virtual, so wherever you are, you can tune in, and it is completely free because we really want to make these conversations be at the forefront and be available to anyone and everyone. So you can go to elevatenetwork.com/summit to register.
Yes. And we do, of course, talk about how women bear the brunt of climate change in this interview. So you get kind of a little bit of a sneak preview about the things we're going to talk about at Mobilize Women. But if you want the full conversation with all the experts, you're going to want to come.
Yeah. So I'm very excited to hear your conversation with Rumaitha.
Let's get to it. Hi, everybody. I am so stoked for who I have for you today. She is going to be one of our speakers at Mobilize Women. I know we've been talking about that a lot lately. This is Rumaitha Al Busaidi, who is here.
Hi, Megan. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Hi, it is my pleasure. Trust me, I am so excited to get started.
Yes, likewise.
Definitely. So, for anybody who doesn't know who you are, you've done a lot. And I mean a lot, everybody. So, like, look up her bio. But do you want to give everybody kind of a rundown on who you are and what you've done and how you've gotten to where you are today?
I think that's the most difficult question when people ask me, like, who are you and what do you do? Because I do a lot of things, like you mentioned. But I think the best way to describe myself is I'm a multi-potentialite. So I wear different hats, doing different things that I am so fascinated about, and I don't get bored with any of them. So I am a marine scientist by background. I am a climate change activist. I love sports. I used to be a former soccer player and became the first female soccer pundit, Arab female soccer pundit to the Arab world. Uh, Traveled the world, reaching almost 80 countries. So it's just so many things. Depends on how you want to define me, I guess.
Absolutely. And specifically, you're going to be in our panel about gender equity and climate change. But like when I was putting together your bio I was sent your bio, but when I was uploading it to the site, I thought that stuff about football was, it says football on the site because that's what everybody else calls it.
Exactly.
Yes. But thank you for saying soccer for us Americans. I thought the soccer thing was so cool that you're the first female soccer analyst in the Arab world.
Yeah, it is really cool. And believe me, when that actually happened, I had no idea that I was setting a record. I thought it was so normal. Like, why don't we do this? Why aren't women doing this? And lo and behold, oh, do you know that you are actually the first woman ever? And I was like, really? Hasn't been any other woman that has ever done this, that decided to just go on radio and capitalize on her expertise. And they were like, not the ones that we know of. So yeah, it just happened as a fluke, I would say.
Yeah. And before we get into your work with the environment, I mean, I'm sure this has to do with the environment too, but you're also the youngest Omani to ever step foot on the South Pole.
Yeah.
That is so cool to me.
It is cool after the fact. It hasn't been cool during the whole expedition. It was just quite a lot to kind of take in as well. It was being in the snow for 56 days. And it was just a whirlwind of an adventure which after in hindsight, I don't think I'd ever do again because of how taxing it was, and not physically. It was a lot of mental work that you needed to do to kind of push yourself to reach the target. And that was, I think, my biggest challenge so far.
Yes. So yeah, I've always wondered what it's like to go to the South Pole. It does sound like it's work, which I kind of always figured.
But it's it's not like the type of work that we kind of associate with doing sports or any adventures or like mountain climbing and stuff. I think it's because you are in a place that is considered the last wilderness on earth. um, Animals interact with you quite differently than anywhere else in the planet. Like, they don't feel intimidated by humans. You should be intimidated by them. And in the same time, I think it was the very first time that I legit experienced the true meaning of silence and what silence actually means. That I think we're losing that to a lot of development and really urban life. That we really tend to forget how it really means to actually be out in nature, in one with nature, but also experience silence. That you are then left with your thoughts, which is something that's quite fascinating, I would say.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And as a person who, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, I am on the autism spectrum, and sometimes getting all that noise
Mm,
away can mean anything to somebody even who's not on the spectrum, who
mm,
just, you want to breathe just for 1 second.
yeah, I can just
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
I can't imagine how that rush of quiet must feel. But so, yeah, so what you're going to be speaking on, in case people are wondering, I did mention you're going to be speaking on our panel, Gender Equity and Climate Change. So do you want to talk about how you got involved with climate work, with you're a marine scientist, with environmental work? You want to talk about, what was your inspiration there, and what was your, journey through that?
Sure. So, like, my beginning with the environment and deciding to be a marine scientist started off way when I was 10 years old. So, my dad is a big fan of the National Geographic, and this was before the internet. There was magazine subscriptions that would come at your door every single month with the new edition or issue of National Geographic. So until this day, if you walk into our family library, it's filled with a lot of yellow because of those magazines and those subscriptions that my dad used to have. And one of them back in the 90s actually came with a cover. The cover image on one of the issues was a green turtle that was actually captured in my own home country of Oman. And I just was very fascinated. I was like, what? We actually have these creatures here? It's not only in cartoons and in like documentaries that we see on the BBC and so on. And that was, I think, my first like realization of, oh my God, there's so much that is so cool that I could experience and discover. And I think from there on, it just became a fascination with the sea, with the environment, just trying to kind of understand as much as possible, then pursuing a degree in the field, and then ending up working in the environmental space, which really gave me a lot of knowledge and understanding of how we need to really preserve this natural heritage that we all have in all the spaces that we occupy, right? But then climate became such a big topic that we were discussing. And actually, my trip to the South Pole was in a bid to actually spread awareness on not only the local NGO that we have here back home, but also on the message of we need to protect as much as we can when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the species that we have, the whales that we have. Global warming is a huge issue that we take lightly until you really experience it. And I think being in spaces where, like, being at the South Pole and really seeing how glaciers are actually melting away, getting like waking up at like 3 a.m. in the morning with icebergs cracking, and then you have no idea if it's an avalanche that's coming towards you as a result of that, is quite scary. So that, I think, that actually amplified a lot of my work when it came to really the climate space and really advocating for the preservation and making sure that we do a lot when it comes to climate action. But what was even more interesting is as I went deeper into that, I came to find out that gender plays a really big role. Like climate change and the impacts of climate change doesn't impact everybody the same way. Gender plays a big role. Women are impacted the most, according to UN statistics as well. It states that 80% of the refugees of the world are actually women, and these are climate refugees who are really moving away from spaces that are impacted by cyclones, by floods, by drought. So that really kind of woke me up and I said, we need to do even more of this stuff because I'm a woman. I've seen impacts of climate change firsthand. I come from a country where we get cyclones now every single year. At a time back before 2007, we didn't have any. So it just became such a big thing that I was like, this is a space that I need to advocate more of. And there's not many people who are yet really stepping into those spaces of looking at the cross section of gender and climate. There's more and more, but we need more of us to actually talk about it as well.
Yes, definitely. And I was actually going to ask, you mentioned the NGO. You are a member of you serve on the board of the only environmental NGO in the country, which is the Environment Society of Oman.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask, what was the process like getting involved with them and, signing up? Because I know we have a lot of people back home or listening wherever their home is who want to get more involved, but
Mm-hmm.
aren't sure how to go about doing that.
So I started off as a volunteer. I signed up as a student asking how I could actually dedicate some of my time to really help. And a lot of the help at that point, because you know how guidelines are when it comes to labor and children, that you weren't able to do a lot more than just beach cleanup activities. But as I grew older, I just felt more like there was a sense of community as well. There were a lot of people who had different stories with their reasons of why they wanted to get involved, but at the end we were all serving one big purpose of really preserving and conserving nature and really making sure that this voiceless thing that really is protecting us all and giving us this so much solace and so much shelter needs to be protected as well. So I started off as a volunteer and then just kind of became super active to the extent that the community themselves said, you need to actually run for the elections of the board. I think a lot of people will support your nomination to actually be there. So then I ended up being elected. And yeah, I have served in the board for now 6 years. And it's always kind of a mini triumph whenever you're reelected because you're doing a good job versus not being reelected because a lot of people are not happy with the work that you do. So yeah, that's how I think getting involved is very easy. Just figure out what the NGOs that you have around, what are the opportunities, what sort of help. And what's interesting is a lot of people think getting involved in an environmental NGO specifically involves a lot of like technical or scientific work, but there's a lot of other ways that you could participate and volunteer, be it spreading the word, be it using your specifically young people and their skills in social media. Can be a really big, huge tool to kind of pass on that message as well.
Absolutely. And I did want to mention that I loved that story about your dad being a big fan of National Geographic and the yellow magazines being everywhere. Kind of sounds like your dad and my dad should hang out because that's like identical stories of I'll be watching some National Geographic show or any documentary show about nature. And my dad would like, oh, I've already seen that 3 times. And I'm like, Dad, how?
Yeah, so I grew up waking up to the news playing, and it was always like some science bit on. And my dad had like video VHS tapes of a lot of those scientific documentaries with David Attenborough's voice when he was younger. It was just fascinating to me. Like he is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to science that I'm just surprised why he isn't a scientist to begin with.
Same. My dad is the same way. I'm like, he's fascinated with science and history, but it's just a fascination. He'll literally be sitting there watching some show about, mysteries of the deep and whatever. And they'll be like, well, what could cause this? And he'll just throw out an idea and then it'll turn out that's what it is. And I'm like,
Amazing.
you haven't even seen this before.
Well, that's the experience, right? That's the knowledge that you actually gain if you watch something for decades in the making, I guess. But it's
Yeah.
fascinating, I think, and even conversations with, I think, both our fathers always ends up with this discussion about like scientific stuff, which I find so cool. And I always tend to learn something new every single time I speak to my dad about something.
Same. And just a wealth of knowledge on things that you don't even know
Yeah,
exist.
true,
Yeah.
true, yes.
Yeah, and I love that he's teaching, you're the scientist in the family and he's still teaching you things.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing I think because he loves to kind of absorb a lot of knowledge, it's quite amazing the amount of nuggets that you tend to get from him or fun facts. Today it's about X, Y, and Z. You're like, really? I had no idea that this actually worked. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's people like that that we need, I think that's such an important thing is not everyone's going to be a scientist, but you can be interested. You can look things up and find interest in them. You don't have to understand, I know that I find science fascinating, but I can't do math worth anything. So I just kind of admire it from the sidelines and I'll watch documentaries on it, but in school I wasn't the greatest at it. But like that's what it takes to move this forward is just even if you feel like, oh, I'm not a scientist, I'm not meant to be in those spaces, like sure you are. Stand up for the planet.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of imposter syndrome that is plaguing everybody, right? That, yeah, because you don't know much or you don't have a degree in the specific field, and you feel that you don't have the legitimacy to actually be in those spaces, which is so wrong because you should empower yourself to actually step up. And not only that, I mean, there's always a different way of looking at things and a fresh view that is always needed when you're tackling whatever the issue is. And that's why, in a lot of, like, for instance, multilateral settings like the UN and so on, the amount of knowledge and the amount of like specializations and people who know different things, it's quite enormous. It's like it's not a homogeneous thing where everyone is painted with the same brush and have exactly the same experience or knowledge, which kind of makes life like life has flavor as a result of that as well, so yeah,
Yes.
I think we need to kind of pat ourselves and just encourage ourselves personally to kind of step into spaces that we feel that we're unwelcomed, I think.
Yeah, especially when it's climate change, intersects with so many different areas like
Mm.
gender. If you're passionate about gender equality, like you said, it has a huge impact on gender.
Yeah, true. And it's not like I did any women's studies or any social sciences for that matter, but it just makes sense that you can make connect the dots, start reading, ask people about their experiences as well, and you just will be shocked with the amount of information that you actually end up getting just from these interactions that you're getting because you are seeking that information and seeking that knowledge just so you can understand that issue better. So for those who are listening, I mean, even a Google search on something and starting reading a Wikipedia page or something is more than enough to kind of build that interest to kind of learn more. And that's how it started with me as well. Like, started just reading on the internet and books about this stuff, and then it just snowballed into a bigger thing.
Ugh, absolutely. And I want to talk about you are often called an advocate for youth leadership, which we've seen so much youth leadership, especially around the environment, but around many other things. I know you and I are around the same age, which means we've always been the young ones, but now we're seeing even younger
Hmm.
people come up in this movement. What's it been like, seeing those voices of your generation and even generations younger, move their way up the environmental ladder?
I think it's just been amazing. There's more and more need, I think, in international settings as well, when we see it, that there's a much more need to kind of get more of the younger people. I think more and more people, if we talk about the environment and climate change, your number one stakeholder is your future generation. So if you don't involve them in the conversation, you're too late to actually even fix this thing. And we're seeing more momentum on that. And it just is very heartwarming that I think our generation was the one that was fighting night and day, protesting everywhere in all the major meetings just to demand a seat on the table. And the younger generation, I'm not saying that they're having it any easier, but now we're kind of getting people realize that yes, it's important. And what's even more fascinating is more and more of us, our generation who understands that plight, are taking a lot of leadership roles now that allows those spaces to be opened up. So you're actually seeing a major seismic shift in a lot of these conversations now, where you're having more younger and younger people stepping into these spaces and really not even sugarcoating what they think, really speaking their mind and saying, this is what needs to be done, and we're not happy with what you guys are doing as world leaders. You need to do better. So that's really kind of a sounding board, I think, for them to kind of realize that it's not enough and everyone else is really not happy. You need to work better, do better, collaborate better, so we can all make sure that not only this generation, but the ones after them are able to live in this planet that we call Earth, which is so enlightening.
Yeah, and I know Maricella, who's my other co-host, who's older than I am. She probably won't want to say how much older than I am, but she's older than I am, and she is on the podcast all the time saying specifically, God bless Gen Z, God bless millennials. Like, they're really out there fighting the fight, and I wholeheartedly agree. As a millennial, of course, God bless millennials, but Gen Z will really be out there fighting.
Yeah, but it's so interesting as well. So I always give this example. Like, you see a lot of activists joining boards now, and and getting board seats and really pushing traditional companies to actually do better and really look at values and the values of their stakeholders as well into perspective. And those are millennials. Like, a lot of these activist board members or board directors now, and activist groups that are joining in, are millennials who decided and said, well, I have this extra income now because I am towards the older millennial generation. I can actually put my money where it is worth, and really making sure that the entire world benefits from efforts that we can do together. So I think it's like a beautiful mix now of seeing both millennials and Gen Zs all kind of coming together to push the world into the right direction when it comes to really safeguarding this place that we call Earth and call home, you know?
Absolutely. I want to ask about, let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this best. I grew up in Texas. And there are a lot of people very invested in Texas in not fixing climate change, as there are across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you deal with like the backlash that you get, or climate change deniers? Like, what do you tell them, especially when sometimes it's just people who were misinformed by bad actors who have a vested interest in not fixing climate change?
So that's interesting. So a lot of the time, it's just continuing to have that uncomfortable conversation. I'll just give you an example. Most recently, I was moderating a panel on climate change, and everyone was so blindsided that within the panel was someone who was a senior leadership in one of these major companies in the country and was a complete climate denier, where he actually believed that it was a conspiracy of the West to make sure that poorer developing countries were actually paying them to actually flourish. And I was like, how does that even come up as a conversation, that this is a conspiracy? But then what was very interesting was, as you kind of continue having that discussion and just pushing and pushing to understand what the reason behind it is, his main concern was the economy is not doing well, and the concerns that we actually are focusing on is so veering off of other agendas that doesn't make sense for us to do it. And then it was just a matter of continuing to kind of explain, well, there's another point of view that we could look into this, and really bringing that conversation in. I think for a lot of climate deniers, it just, I mean, the story that the media really carries mostly when it comes to climate change is a lot of like doom and gloom, and that's it. We're going to die tomorrow. And then they wake up and they're like, well, we're alive. So that's not going to happen, right? So this is definitely a conspiracy. And just making sure that no, there's actually facts and figures and experiences of people that are being impacted by this just next door to where you live, and making it real for them to kind of understand that as well. And I think as we push and have these conversations further, it turns out that we all have the best intentions at heart. It's just that we kind of perceive things in a different way. And if we don't continue having those discussions, we'll continue having climate deniers forever. If we just kind of flee from the situation and just say, well, we agree to disagree and that's it. I don't believe in that. I believe like we all have to kind of push and continue discussing.
Yes, definitely. And even as somebody who is very passionate that absolutely climate change is real, absolutely we're having an impact and it's not good. Sometimes the doom and gloom can even get to me where it's the burnout of, oh, there's
Mm,
another doom and gloom
mm,
countdown where it says
yeah,
we have this much left, and it's just kind of it's exhausting. So it's good to point out that,
yeah.
conversations need to keep happening.
But also it's the same in another perspective as well. Not everyone does put climate change as their top priority, like for instance I would, or perhaps you would. And that's okay. I mean, if that's not your priority, there are other things that you're worrying about that is a major doom and gloom for you in comparison to other people. And it's so interesting, like specifically in the region that I am at in the Middle East, there's a lot of discussion at the moment. I'm next door to a country that's war torn, which is Yemen, and we have a lot of heat, a lot of drought. Food security is a big issue, so there's a lot of concern there. But what's interesting is because, like you mentioned, climate change is so cross sectional, all these issues were perpetuated one way or another because of climate change. Like we have drought because of climate change. Wars came up, like the Arab Spring in itself was as a result of food security, which was as a result of drought, which was as a result of these changing environments and weather patterns and so on. So a lot of these, as you continue having these discussions, you come to realize like, well, it's all cross sectional. It's all kind of related to one another. So while I appreciate your priority is different, we all need to really be concerned with where we're going with this, and we need to work together despite our different priorities as well.
Yes, yes, I love that because I talk about that all the time with people as it relates to women's rights. Is you might not think that you care about women's rights, but here is how all of these things are affected by it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna go to the lightning round very soon, but I wanted to ask, we see a lot of the big names in the environmental movement, but I was wondering if, in addition to you, obviously, who are some other environmental leaders that you really see that you think people should be listening to and following?
Wow, tough question. There's so many in the region, and they're doing amazing work. They're doing phenomenal work. Um, so we have a Saudi activist by the name of Sara Al Harthi. She's actually the easiest way that you could find her is she just made it in the Yale Climate Fellows program. She has been advocating a lot when it comes to Saudi Arabia and the energy transition and the need to actually make sure that there's so many things that so many aspects of the energy transition that we're not really talking about, be it the access to water, the landscape when it comes to the environment and policy wise. So she is amazing when it comes to that. There's another marine scientist in Bahrain as well. Her name is Reem Al Maalla. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to spell out her last name. It's Almaella. And what's fascinating about her is she has been as part of the COP conventions since I can remember. And she is such a sounding board for me personally whenever I kind of have issues with, how bureaucracy happens in the multilateral world as well. So she kind of is a really good sounding board as well when it comes to that. And then you have, like, when it comes to men, you have Nishat Shafi, you have Tariq Al Ulaybi, who are just amazing, like authorities and agencies when it comes to climate change. And these are unconventional names that you don't tend to hear a lot about, but are doing amazing and phenomenal work in addition to the ones that we already know.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what I was hoping for, and I will go follow all of those today.
Awesome.
Yes. So we're going to go into our lightning round, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. You can do one sentence or less. A lot of people do more than one sentence, me included when I got asked these questions.
Okay.
I'm going to do the easiest one first because I think my audience would kill me if I didn't ask this, even though it's the most obvious question in the world, I think, for you. But if would you rather explore outer space or the bottom of the ocean?
Bottom of the ocean.
Yes, I thought so. I
Yeah.
had I had somebody else who worked on solar wind on wind power through the oceans on the podcast recently. Those who are listening, you'll hear that in a bit. And I was like, I feel like I have to ask you the ocean question, even though it's pretty obvious.
And they did answer the ocean, right?
Oh yes, 100%.
Okay.
She was like, I would think that would be obvious, and I was like, yeah, it is.
Exactly. Yeah. The ocean is
Yeah,
home.
it's so cool.
Yeah. If you
Uh,
haven't dived ever, you should. It's amazing.
I haven't, but I will say I see. I have a fascination with sunken ships, so like
Mm.
I'll watch any documentary about like them discovering some sunken ship or anything, and just seeing the remains. And so I kind of like live vicariously through those documentaries.
Amazing. I'm glad that you never mentioned the Titanic. Or is it a
I
favorite movie of yours?
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. Titanic is my favorite movie.
Is it because of
I
the
was
shipwreck or just because
because
it's
yeah, because when I
Titanic?
was a kid, I was fascinated by them, and then I grew up and I loved the movie, and I also just love the movie, period. But I was trying to say that, like, I was trying because I do watch other ones with other shipwrecks, so I was trying not to say the obvious one, but then like I have to be like, yeah, Titanic's my favorite
Yeah.
movie. I
Cool.
also just love the movie.
Yeah. It's an awesome movie. I actually sat through a rerun of it because in celebration of the 20th year, which was this year, right? And
Yeah.
I attended a 4D screening of the movie. So I ended up leaving the movie theater all wet and cold because of the experience.
Yeah, I think it's the 25th year this
25th
year or
year or
26th.
20, I don't know. Something among,
It's
yeah, it's
something. It came out
25th
in
year,
97.
probably 25th year. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my heart will go on forever. But yeah, I love that movie. I cry every time. So that's a fun fact for you. Yes, I do love Titanic. So yeah, that was really long on that one. But that's what happens when you have fun questions.
I know.
What is yeah, what is your favorite mythical creature?
Huh. So for the longest time as a kid, I thought the narwhal was a mythical creature, and it's not a mythical creature. So I don't know if that qualifies.
Well, it kind of is because didn't sailors mistake them for mermaids?
Yeah. So I
Yeah, that's where
actually
the mermaid
grew up,
legend came from.
yeah, so I actually grew up thinking like, "Ah, they are so mythical and they're so cool. Like everyone loves unicorns. I love them." And then I started my degree and they were like, "No, they're actually an animal and they actually have their entire like it's a cetacean family type of creature." And I was like, "What?" I had no idea.
Yeah, I feel like that's our generation with the giant squid too, where we like grew up thinking it was some like mythical thing, and they're like, no, we found real ones.
Yeah.
If you could time travel, where's the first place you would go?
Hmm. I'd That's a tough question. But perhaps I would go back to 1970. Yeah, July of
Ooh,
1970. Main reason behind that is I've grew up listening to a lot of stories of how my own country has transformed drastically and very fast. So it'd be just fascinating to see how people lived before then.
Absolutely. It's always interesting to see if people want to go back or forward in time.
Yeah, I wouldn't go forward. I'll just ruin the fun.
Yeah, I agree. That's what like my boss and I kind of agree on that, where we're like, I think that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, and like I just always imagine if I go into the future and get so engrossed into how life supposedly should be much more easy because of technology or whatnot, and then go back in time, I think that would be a really tough transition.
Yeah. And then you're going to be like, no, I promise we'll get there in 700 years, but
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Let's see. What's the most used app on your phone?
WhatsApp.
Oh, WhatsApp. That's a good one.
hmm I can't go a day without it.
Yeah. What Oh, well, I guess I know the answer to this question too. What sport would you compete in if you were in the Olympics?
Soccer.
Yay!
Yay.
Uh
Or speed climbing, or they have this new sport that just made it into the Olympics the last in the Japan one, Tokyo 2022. So it's speed climbing. So it's one of the two.
yes. Yeah, it's so cool. I honestly followed like speed climbing on YouTube because I found out through the Olympics. And I was
Right.
like, this is such a cool
And it
sport.
was the first time ever that it made it to the Olympics. So I was like, this is so cool. Yeah, so one of these
Yeah.
two sports for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it when they put new sports in.
Mm.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Seize the moment. I think that's the best of advice. And I think for me, I translated it into say yes to everything. You can always say no later.
I love that. Yeah, simple but so effective.
hmm
And finally, what is one thought that you would want to leave with our listeners?
You can make a difference, be it big, be it small. If you set your mind into something and want to make a difference, you can do it today.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I can't wait for everyone to get to hear this, and I can't wait for you to join us at Mobilize Women.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was great, Megan.
Thank you. It was technically a little behind the scenes thing. It was technically not the first interview I had conducted for this podcast. I've done a few others that will be coming out soon. It's just this was the first one timeline wise that was going to come out. So, I'd had a little bit of practice. I might when we get to the first one that I ever did, I'll probably give a disclaimer that was like, this is my first one. Everybody be nice.
You look, you are so personable, so curious. I know I pushed you to do some of these interviews, but it's because I do think you're going to have such a different point of view than I do, and it's going to be much more valuable for our listeners to hear both of these points of view. And you'll
I
hear
totally
Megan more and more in our podcast soon.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's actually turned out to be, I was so nervous at first, as I always am with everything, but I actually have found that I really enjoy it.
And as always, I keep pushing people to do things they don't want to do, but
Yeah.
it's all for the greater good.
Yes, I agree. It's turned out to be, everything about this podcast has turned out to be like so fun.
Good, because I remember when I first said, Megan, you're taking over the podcast. You were very nervous.
I was yeah, I was like, what? Oh, huh?
So, how about we talk about some history makers?
I'm down. Let's go ahead and say some people who've made history. So, Yvette Davids was nominated to become the first woman superintendent of the U.S. Naval Academy.
Exciting. Ariana DeBose will play Asha, Disney's first Afro-Latina princess. Oh my God! Sorry. You got my real reaction.
Yeah. That was an appropriate reaction. I put it second for a reason. Like, I was like, I'm gonna put this in the slot that Maricella usually reads because I bet she doesn't know, and I bet she's gonna be excited.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, they released the like poster for the movie. It's so cool. I'm ready. It's a long time coming.
I went to parentheses, since we're talking about Disney really quickly. I went to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yesterday.
Yeah.
I have many thoughts about it, but why I'm bringing it up is because I hadn't actually seen the trailer of The Little Mermaid.
It's so
Oh
good.
my God, it made my heart so happy.
I just watched today. They released. Sorry, we're gonna go on a little tangent here. I love Disney. We love Disney here.
Yeah.
They released her cut of Part of Your World, like her full song of
Oh
part.
my
It's
God.
so beautiful.
She's so
Like at
talented.
first, yeah, at first I was like kind of hesitant because you're so used to Jodie Benson's voice singing it, and you're so
Mhm.
used to her take. So like whenever she'll like do something slightly different, it's like you kind of jump. But by the end of it, I was like, this is just so beautiful, and it's just, oh, her voice is so powerful. You can see you're like, okay, yeah, 100%, yeah. This is why she was picked to be Ariel. One of the million reasons, because holy cow, this is a
And in
performance.
case you're someone like me who doesn't always know what people are talking about, particularly when they're talking about pop culture, movies, or things like that, we're talking about Hailey Bailey, who plays Ariel in the new film, and she's incredibly talented, and seeing a Black woman in that role it just gave me chills. It was really good.
Yeah, it's so good. Although I will say their Flounder and Sebastian, I don't know how to feel about that yet.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where they're just like realistic fish and crab, and I'm like, I don't know about
Yeah,
this.
I kind of liked my old Sebastian. But anyway, look, let's go back to our history makers because yeah, we're going on a very big tangent right now. So,
Yeah,
again, congratulations to Ariana DeBose, who will play Asha, Disney's first Afro-Latina princess. I'm so excited.
yay! Taisha Fernandez became the first woman captain of the Atlanta Public Schools Police.
Oh wow. Rachel Seconelli became the first woman top game warden for the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries.
I want to shout out real quick Louisiana. They appear in our history makers a lot. And so, like, of all the states, there's a few states that appear a lot. California appears a lot, as one would kind of expect. New York appears pretty frequently, but like Louisiana appears a lot. So, like, shout out to Louisiana. It seems like they're really pushing for more history to be made down there.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. I say down there like I'm not living in the South now. I'm so used to speaking from the New York perspective. Vinesh Phogat became the first Indian woman to win 2 medals at the Wrestling World Championships.
And Pamela Berrigan became the first Latina deputy chief of the St. Paul Police Department. God, these Latinas, I warms my heart.
I know. I try to put the Latinas in your spots to read now because we had those 2 weeks where like I kept getting all of them and I was like, this feels not fair.
No, these are the ones that make me the most excited. So thank you for that.
Yes. Well, next week we're going to be talking. It's going to be back to another one of Maricella's interviews, but it's going to be another mobilized women speaker. Do you want to talk about who you're interviewing next week?
Yeah, I had the best time talking to Sade Dosan. She's the chief of operations and development at Caring Across Generations. I had talked to her, so I reached out to her to be part of our Mobilized Women panel on the caregiving crisis. She is she was a little surprised, which was interesting because she's so fantastic. And they asked me, they're like, "How did you find us?" And I'm like, "I magic." But she's so fantastic. She knows her stuff. She's trying to change the conversation around the burden of caregiving, so to speak. So actually, we talk about it in the podcast, and we talked about it when I first met her, which was I said, the burden of caregiving. And her colleague were like, "We don't say that." And I was like, "Oh." And they explained kind of what they're trying to do, and it is so powerful. We talk about the executive order that has been signed. We talk about so many things that are so relevant to now. So Sade Dozan, Chief of Operations and Development at Caring Across Generations. She firmly believes in the power of collective voices to shift culture and policy surrounding under-resourced communities and marginalized groups as she works to achieve sustainable care for all. I had a blast talking to her, and it just felt so natural and such a great conversation. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing, and she's going to be amazing. And I love that she was kind of surprised. That's kind of the whole idea behind the Mobilize Women. Women you don't know, you should know, and we should all know her.
Yeah, we should all know her. That's the beauty of Mobilize Women. Women you don't know, you should know. So I hope you can join us for Mobilize Women on June 7th, virtual, free. We'll have conversations around gender equity and climate change, the caregiving crisis, making workplaces more human, and I'll be moderating a conversation on getting future-proofed. So I hope you can join us. It's free. You can sign up at elevatenetwork.com/summit.
See you there, and see you next week.
Bye.
Ellevate Network drives real results for ambitious women trying to break through the glass ceiling and achieve success in their careers. We offer a platform full of resources and opportunities for growth, all designed to help you unlock your potential. With Ellevate support, you can take the first step toward achieving your professional goals. With a supportive community and tangible resources at your fingertips, you're only one step away from reaching your fullest potential. Join us today and take advantage of our 30-day free trial to start building the career of your dreams. Thanks so much for listening to the Ellevate podcast. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, give us 5 stars, and share your review. You can learn all about Ellevate membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. Thanks so much, and join us next week.